actually has a whole YouTube channel. You can go find her. It's a parenting tips. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, the most powerful nation in the world at the time of Daniel. He had conquered all of the surrounding nations, including Israel, and had carried their young nobility off to Babylon, where many of them were serving as his wise advisors. That's how Nebuchadnezzar met Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, if you've begun reading the book of Daniel this week, you have been reminded of some of those incredible stories where the king was getting acquainted with the God of Israel. Daniel chapter 2 recounts how God was giving Nebuchadnezzar dreams about the future, and Daniel was interpreting those dreams for him. And in Daniel chapter 3, when the king sort of turned one of those dreams into an ego trip and a 90-foot tall statue, and then tried to kill Daniel's three friends when they wouldn't worship the statue, God rescued them in a stunning way and revealed himself to Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar had a change of heart and ordered everyone in his nation to serve the God of Israel. But sometime after the end of chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar's pride had begun to creep back into his heart, and he had returned to acting like he had built his glorious kingdom all by himself, and he completely forgot about God. So there he was, quite literally the king of the world, the richest, most powerful man in the world with almost unlimited resources at his fingertips. And then there's God. And let's be honest. At the outset, Daniel chapter 4 doesn't put God in a very positive light, does it? There is Nebuchadnezzar, ruling his kingdom and seemingly minding his own business, when out of nowhere he receives a message from God in a dream that he will be stripped of his kingdom until he acknowledges the sovereignty of heaven. Now, I've heard from some of my own friends and read lots of commentaries from other authors who are outraged at this sort of behavior on God's part, and they find it rather offensive. Maybe at first blush, I would be inclined to agree with them. For God to demand such homage, such worship and obedience, almost makes him sound like more of a dictator than the freedom-loving God who invites us to come and then allows us to make up our own minds. Daniel 4 makes God sound like a bully, which nobody likes. And in that regard, we might all agree that if this is the way God goes about running his universe, he's not going to get that far. Forced respect only lasts so long before it gives way to resentment and rebellion. Like with the little kindergarten boy whose teacher asked him to sit down when he didn't want to. First, she asked nicely, but he refused. Then she offered a reward if he would comply, but he still refused. Finally, she threatened to punish him if he did not succumb. So he did. But he also said, I may be sitting down on the outside, but I'm still standing up on the inside. Fast forward 10 years, and that kindergarten teacher probably isn't going to be able to force the boy to sit down any longer. He'll be much bigger than her. So, bullying a child into submission isn't really a long-term solution. But I suppose we should ask if God is really being a bully here. After all, there's a big difference between bullying and, say, parenting. Well, maybe I have to get done with the toddler years. Before that, it kind of feels like the same thing. But which one of us parents hasn't been referred to as a bully, or maybe something worse, by an angry child who's toiling under a yoke of necessary but unwanted discipline. When I tell my girls no, does that make me a bully? Of course not. No matter how many times they say it does. Most parents do what they believe is best for their children, even when the road is hard, because they care about their well-being. And not just their physical well-being, but also their emotional and spiritual well-being, the development of their maturity. So rather than just taking God's actions at face value in Daniel chapter 4, perhaps we need to dig a little deeper and ask, for whose benefit is God acting here? Why is he doing this? Is it somehow for his own ego? Is it that he needs to be acknowledged and validated by all his creatures, or he'll throw a temper tantrum? Or is it somehow for Nebuchadnezzar's good? Well, first of all, we could start by looking at how well God's little demand for homage worked on Nebuchadnezzar. If God was looking to humble the king with his demand, it was pretty unsuccessful. Because following his dream, Nebuchadnezzar was given a year to implement some changes in his attitude, and when the time was up, nothing much had changed. Verses 29 and 30 say, 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" It would seem that simply making demands doesn't yield a lot of fruit. So Nebuchadnezzar ignored what Daniel had told him, or maybe after a time he just slipped back into his old ways. And subsequently, everything Daniel said would happen to him came to pass. He was driven away from people and ate grass like a cow. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar went from being the king of Babylon to being homeless. He lost his mind and everything else too. He lost his power, his authority, and control of his kingdom. And we might still be inclined to say that God isn't looking too good here. But remember, that's not the end of the story for our old king. After Nebuchadnezzar had spent some time munching on the grass and pondering the reality that his blessings had come from God, and obviously weren't the result of his own power or cleverness, God restored him. God restored him. And actually, God did more than just restore him to the throne. He restored his sanity, gave him back his kingdom, and then made him greater than he had ever been in the past. Aha! No matter what some of God's actions might look like on the surface, in the end, his motives come shining through. And Nebuchadnezzar is a great example. By taking away his sanity, by stripping him of his kingdom, God wasn't trying to crush Nebuchadnezzar, he was trying to exalt him. God wasn't out to destroy the king of Babylon. He was out to save him. And as the king acquired humility and his heart was changed, he was actually able to achieve a much higher level of greatness. Because true greatness comes through humility. Everything God did to Nebuchadnezzar, he did for Nebuchadnezzar. He gave him the kingdom of Babylon, then took it away, and then gave it again in an even greater way than he'd known it before. The king of Babylon may have been a heathen king, but God was still after his heart. And he did everything he could to get Nebuchadnezzar's attention, turn him around, and set him on the right path. God did all of that for his best good. And God is no different today. He is after you and me all the time, chasing after our hearts the way hounds hunt their prey. He will do whatever is necessary to save us. He will leave no stone unturned. If God takes something away from us, it is for the purpose of giving us more. If we are stuck in pride and arrogance, like the tall tree in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he will most certainly take an axe to that trunk. He will chop us all the way down, if needs be, so that he may have the opportunity to build us back up, even higher than we were before. That, my friends, is the definition of love. When you act in the best interest of the other, no matter how much it may hurt, no matter how it makes you look, to do what is necessary for the good of the other. Is that the definition of a bully? No, that is the definition of love. And that's the kind of person our God is. He loves us with the kind of love that will act, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. And if we get mad at him for parenting us in this way, well, maybe God has a kitchen table up in heaven where he sits and eats ice cream too. But our anger will not deter him. He will give when it is best. And he will take away when it is best. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.